Hey everybody, today is October 30th. I'm your host, John Bell, and this is DogmanCams.com. And we are back with Kay. Yesterday we were speaking with Kay, and she was telling us some great stories with good information, and we got cut off due to power and storms. So we've got Kay back with us. Welcome, Kay.
Hi, good morning. It's good to be
Glad,
back.
glad to have you back. So,
Thank
Kay,
you.
if you will, briefly touch on what the last story you were talking about last time, just a small recap.
Okay, well, I believe I had left off with the second and third encounter, which were together.
Right.
That's the one where I was doing laundry next door at my friend's place, which is my sister-in-law's first cousins. So I was doing my laundry in her basement. I came out of her house and I had seen a dog man at the end of their driveway, which was about a half a football field away. And yeah, so I I had once I saw that, I couldn't really like control my emotions that day, and still to this day I can't really. It's hard for me to even think about it. And yeah, so me and my children had left. We had moved from our reserve that day, thank goodness. And yeah, we left that day and we never returned. And I don't ever want to return to that
Right.
spot.
I don't blame you. And
Yeah.
and so and but this time, what was significant about this time is you really were able to get a good look at
I
this
saw the
creature.
whole thing,
Right.
all of it, every single part of it I saw. Yeah.
And and give us a brief description of that again, if you don't
Um,
mind.
the way he was standing, because it was standing on 2 feet and it was a male. Um, it was directly me and it were basically face to face, but 50 yards apart. And I wasn't moving. I was stuck. I was frozen. But this thing it seemed to have control of me. Like I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. And it just stood there with its hands down, and its hands were almost reaching its knees, and its hands were in fists. And I did see long nails, like claws or nails or whatever they are. And it was standing there with its hands beside its body, and it didn't move, it didn't say nothing, it didn't make a growl, it didn't make a peep. But it slowly moved backwards. It took about 2 or 3 steps backwards into the ditch. It moved to its right behind some trees, behind some bushes, and it was gone. And after that, I was able to move.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and this one, did you say had pointed ears?
Pointed ears, long pointed ears. Everything was black. The coat was shiny because the sun was shining that morning, and I could see it was glossy. It looked like it was well groomed, to be honest.
Okay. And how what about the snout?
The snout was because it was black. Everything was black on the face, and it was facing me. I couldn't tell how long it was, but I did notice there was a snout there, and
Okay.
the nose was very dog-like. It looked like leathery.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the arms in relation to the rest of the body or the head?
The hands, the hands and the arms were big. They were furry, but not as furry as the shoulders and the abdominal area. The back area was furry, but the abdominals you could see the abs through the fur. There was a little bit fur.
Okay. And what about the legs? Did they look like did they bend like normal human legs or did they bend
No,
backwards
they
like
bent
the
they
hocks of a
bent
dog?
they bent backwards like the hocks of a dog. And that's what scared me the most was the way the legs looked. Like I was trying to figure out how can this thing move with this type of legs, and the upper part of the body was like a human, but the
Right.
legs were like a dog, and I just couldn't make sense of it. And I did see the eyes. The eyes were red.
They were red.
They were
Okay.
red. Yeah.
And you thought possibly you had said that there might have been more than one.
I I think now that there was more than one, because in order to get from the back of the house where I was, where the washer and dryer were located in the basement, was in the facing the back, and there was a window there. So by the time I was upstairs, by the time I reached the main floor of the house, I heard something running down the back stairs, and it was loud and heavy, and it was on 2 feet. But by the time I had reached the outside of the front of the house, it would have had to run past me to get to the approach, the driveway, and that wasn't possible
Right.
because the house wasn't very big at all.
Okay.
So I feel like there was two of them. I just have a feeling that there was two.
And the feeling and impression it gave you when you made eye contact with it.
It The feeling that I got was, I'm here. This is me. You see me now. I'm real. This is what I am. It had full control of me, and that was very that never happened to me before. I
Right.
had no
Almost
control
like
of
a
myself.
dominance.
Yeah, very, very dominant. I was dominated 100%. And to be honest, if that thing had come close to me, or if it had told me to go to it, I probably would have walked towards it.
It's interesting that you bring that up. There's a lot of people in the community that speculate because of similar stories or other
Yeah.
stories along the same lines, where there seems to be some type of a psychological connection or control
Mhm.
beyond normal and beyond just fear, panic, or PTSD kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people speculate that these might have an ability to have what's called infrasounds. And we know that there's some animals in nature, like large cats, tigers,
Yeah.
have this uh, have this ability of called infrasounds, where it can have psychological effects from their roars or growls, or it's an unaudible sound, a signal that affects that can affect other animals, and most oftentimes it causes paralysis or sickness. Some people describe all of a sudden I was in this area and I got very sick. I got vertigo. I just started throwing up. I just
Yeah.
got intense headaches,
Yeah.
and many describe complete paralysis where I could not move no matter what I did.
Yeah.
And then in some cases, people have even talked about um, strange things where I was doing something and I was unaware of what I was doing, like walking towards the creature until someone else started yelling at me.
Oh my goodness.
So it's again it's really kind of theory
Yeah.
or speculation at this point, but we don't know, and a lot of people are like, no, that's not true, blah blah blah. But at
Uh-huh.
this point, we don't know enough to be able to definitively say, this is true, this is not. We're just
Exactly.
trying to piece together what we can with what little evidence we're able to have on these creatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we
Well,
can't rule anything out.
yeah. From my experience, I've lived it, I've seen it, and I felt it. And I
Right.
continue to feel it to this day. It does have a big effect on you. Your life afterwards is never going to be the same, because mine wasn't. Like, even if I didn't physically wasn't near it, I felt like I was damaged,
Right.
Like, it's PTSD, that's what it is.
Right.
And I feel like I'm gonna have it for the rest of my life, which is unfortunate because I have to learn to live with what this thing did to me.
Right.
And of course, it trickles down into your children, and you just have to learn to health cope with it in a healthy way.
Right.
So
And that's
I believe that they do things to you that that I don't know, like, they do things to your mind, because it did something to my mind. Like, if, like I said, if it was gonna tell me come to me, I would have gone to it.
some people claim they feel almost haunted by the creature from the
Exactly.
PTSD.
It is a haunting. It's a haunting for life, and I do feel haunted by that. That's a good word to use.
And some of them describe like this the psychological connection that they had with the creature, even just in an encounter of seeing it. But
Yeah.
that's why I think it's very important in these cases to really go over your emotions and how you feel, because I do believe there's a level of communication.
Yeah.
Human beings are, as we talked about before, we're extremely intuitive creatures, and we're designed to be that way. So when you feel like you're being watched, when you feel like there's something there, or like you said in our last interview, when you felt like I was in danger, I didn't know why. There's
Yeah.
nothing, there's no signals to really tell me I'm in danger. I just feel like I'm in danger, and there's this little voice. You see what I'm saying? So
Exactly.
I think we need to learn to pay attention to
Hmm.
those signals a lot more, because we're hardwired that way for that purpose to help protect us.
For sure, definitely. Um,
And as you
we,
said too before, that sometimes you get instructions: do this, don't do that. I've heard
Mhm.
that many times.
Yeah. And you just have to learn to follow your gut instinct. That's what I learned from these experiences was to follow my gut instinct and do what I'm being told to do, even though no one's physically telling me to do it, but I
Right,
know it's my intuition.
right,
So I'm gonna go with that because it's gotten me this far.
right. So let's move on to the next story you had.
Okay, so this next story is happened to my daughter and my two nieces.
Okay,
This was at my brother's house, the same house where I was babysitting when I had the second and third encounter. I was driving home from his house. So after we had moved out of the reservation, my daughter went back because she played hockey and she wanted to play hockey with her cousins, which were my brother's two daughters. They're all the same age. He has his two oldest daughters are 14 months apart, I think, 15 months apart. And my daughter's right in between them. So they grew up basically like sisters. So she went home to play hockey and she stayed with him and his family in that house. And in the second story was one of my niece's bedrooms. And she said my daughter had told me that three of those girls were in that room. They were all just hanging out, whatever, and laughing and then all of a sudden their bedroom window was open and she said all of a sudden they heard a bang on the wall, the exterior wall, right outside my niece's bedroom window, and the curtain moved and they were wondering what is this? And they saw, she said there was hands that came in and in towards the windowsill. She said there were black fingers with black long claws and it was trying to get inside the window. But it was a high house, like they were on the second story and there was no deck or anything under the window. And they said they could hear it clawing, trying to come up using like its back feet or whatever. And they saw the claws moving and the hands moving and wiggling, trying to come inside. And they screamed. They went running outside of their room, and my brother was in the basement doing work. He was doing renovating. He came upstairs, and by the time they he came upstairs, it was gone. And they were 13 and 12 at the time. So that's their story from that same house.
wow, that is terrifying.
That is terrifying, and I didn't want to scare my daughter about what it could be, what it was. I knew when she told me what they saw, what type of hands it was, what
Right.
it was. But
And
I
what
don't, I
what was
don't.
their what was their reaction?
She said they started screaming. The three girls started screaming when they saw it. That she said they froze because they couldn't tell what it was, and they didn't even want to go near the window to even look at to see what it was.
That's
They
good.
they ran all ran out and they ran towards the basement. They called my brother and he came running up and it was gone by the time they got out. They went to
And
the room.
how's that affected them since?
Well, I haven't been living back home in my reservation for a while, but my daughter still talks about it. And
Right.
when I asked her about it, and I asked her, "What do you think it was?" She said, "I don't know, Mom. I don't know if it was even from this world." She said. So she said she's never seen anything like that type of hands or that type of claws on any animal before. Because my brother and his wife, his whole family, his daughters, they hunt.
Right.
They're avid hunters, and that's the same house where I had killed a bear when I was a teenager. So we do have bears around there, and they knew it wasn't a bear, and bears would not be able to jump 2 stories and to climb into a house.
Right.
Yeah. So I believe I know what it was. And I haven't spoken with my brother directly about it because I know he has his own encounters around there because now his house is fully fenced. It's totally guarded up. He has security cameras everywhere.
Okay, so have you talked to him about that? Has he told you he's been having encounters?
I haven't asked him. I know he won't talk about it because he's a
Okay.
man. He's a
Right.
manly man, and I know he feels like how I felt. Like if I told someone, they would think I'm crazy.
Right.
I have thought about asking him, and I think I will, just because I noticed after they had that encounter, his daughters had that encounter. Um, I know that he did go run outside, and he told his wife and my daughter and his daughters, lock up the house, lock everything, don't open the doors until you know it's me. So he went outside. He went running, took his gun, went running down the road, and went looking for about an hour or so.
Mm.
And my daughter said when he came back, he looked like he was scared.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And since that time, he totally secured up his house and his garage because he built he has his own company. He built his garage and his big trucks beside it, and it's totally secure,
So,
motion lights and everything.
so you put up fencing and motion lights.
Yeah.
How big tall are the fences?
Um, I would say about 5, 6 feet. He
Right.
did a lot of work on it. Like there was no fence there, nothing before. It was just all open. It was all open to the woods, and there is a lake in the back of his house, right in the back, about maybe there's a hill and then there's a lake right behind that hill. I would say
Okay.
20 yards, 30 yards right behind his house. There's water.
Right. Well, there's certainly a lot of connections with water. These things probably stay close to water sources, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
And just like any animal, they're going to require shelter, food,
Mm,
sustainability, and water. But
yes,
if this thing was trying to actually climb into the window, it certainly didn't have any good intentions.
exactly. And that right when my daughter had called me and told me that happened, I sent for her. I sent my other sister to go and get her to stay with her. I said, I don't want her there no more. She's not going back. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. So I sent for my daughter, and by that next weekend, my daughter was back with me where we were living because I was working in northern Alberta.
Right.
Yeah.
Did she have any nightmares or anything from that incident?
She did. She had nightmares, but I don't think she tried to worry me too much about it because she already knew I was worried, and she was one of the ones who knew my encounter. And
Okay.
I didn't want her to overthink anything. And then
Right.
I think she felt the same, that she didn't want me to worry about her.
Right. Right. Yeah, kids can do that.
Yeah,
Trying
so
to trying to look out for us, especially when she knew you were worrying. You think
exactly.
she thought it was the same thing, incidents as yours?
What's that?
You think she felt it was similar to what you were
I think
struggling
she
with?
did. I think she did because she had asked me, she said, "Mom, do you think that's kind of like what you saw?"
Right.
And I said, I don't know, my girl. I said, it could be, but I don't know. I told her it could be something different. And she started asking me questions like, well, what kind of animal would be able to jump that high? What
Mm.
kind of animal would want to come into the house through a window? She said, there's doors.
Right.
And I said, I don't know, my girl. I don't know. Like I had no answers for her, but deep down I did know what it was.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very scary.
It is very scary, and but so far the kids haven't been hurt. My brother's kids, he has big dogs. in his whole property, and he's never had dogs. That's the
Really?
thing too. Yeah.
He's
He got
never had dogs.
he's never had dogs. And the last time I went up there, there's four big dogs that came running. There's two chocolate two chocolate labs, a husky, and something else. I don't even know.
That's great. Well, I will say, in a lot of cases, when people have had activity around their homes, putting up large lights has been helpful. They said, in
Yeah.
deterring these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they have to be high enough to where they can't be easily reached,
Yeah.
and they don't like bright light a lot. So
Yeah.
I have heard
He
that
did.
as a subtle deterrence.
Yeah, he did put up, it was like a street light kind of
Right.
thing, which was weird for being in a reserve. He put
Okay.
up a street pole or whatever by in between his house, excuse me, his house and his garage.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay. When you had your encounters when you were still on the reservation, did you ever think at some point about approaching even the elders
Um,
about your experience?
like I said, I haven't been home since then.
Right.
I don't want to ever go home because of this stuff.
That's
Uh,
sad.
it is very sad, being run out of your home community because of the experiences that you've had there.
Right.
And I grew up there, and I do miss it sometimes, but I look at it as there's more opportunities anyways for me and my family outside of the reserve.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
And and I wanted to also mention in 2018 that this I don't know if this is a direct dogman problem or situation, but in my intuition is just telling me to that it might be a possibility that for where I had my second and third encounter at my ex sister-in-law's place, not even a mile down her road, they had another neighbor. And in 2018, in August of 2018, there was a man that had gone missing from that house.
Oh wow.
During the night, I apparently he had gotten an argument with somebody at that house. There was a bunch of people there. He had left walking and nobody saw him for a few days. And then he was found in the bush in a trail um, by the search party, and his head was missing.
His head was missing.
Yeah, his body was there, but his head was missing, and they can't find it to this day. And there's so many stories saying, oh, it was this and this and this and that, and
Right.
they're saying it's a gang, it's gang affiliated, but you know, me having seen what I saw less than a mile from where they found this unfortunate man,
Right.
his body, I often wonder because this would happen during the night and it was autumn.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about this particular situation, but in many cases I've researched, um, the heads are taken, and stuck and displayed in trees, on poles,
Yeah.
on as a means of warning.
Hmm.
Don't come in here. You're in my territory, kind of
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is common.
It is.
Um,
Yeah. I've noticed that is common with them. It's a territorial thing.
right.
Yeah.
I've heard a friend of mine told me recently a story where he some people were making some call signs in the woods with a device trying to attract attention,
Wow.
and unfortunately they didn't get any attention at the time, but they went back home, which was some distance away from
Mhm.
this location, the site, and something had tracked them and followed them all the way to their house,
Wow.
and when they and it attacked them in their house. All right.
Oh my goodness.
And what's amazing is this husband was in a bathroom, I don't know, possibly brushing his teeth or something like that, and there was a window next to him, but it was a very small window, very
Mhm.
small, not big enough for a human person to fit through.
Mhm.
But whatever this creature was that followed them home, it reached in this window, grabbed this man, and it yanked him through the window
Oh
completely,
goodness.
even though the window's not big enough for him to come through.
Wow.
So it created a very messy scene, you
Oh
know.
my goodness.
It just horrific, something out of a complete nightmare,
Wow.
and
Crazy.
or some kind of insane horror movie, right?
Yes.
And later they were trying to track the missing people,
Mhm.
and uh, and when they find the people, they found their heads on a stick on a pole,
Oh my gosh.
right, in the
Wow.
woods. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of cases of stuff like
Yeah.
exactly like that. You
Yeah.
know, I've actually heard some cases like that with Sasquatch too, but with the Dogman especially, for them it's almost like a trophy and a warning at the
Yeah. Yeah.
same kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I have a feeling that this person, the man who left that night, who they're still looking for his head, like I have a feeling that it is somewhere nearby, but you just have to look high. Like
Right,
I because they're in trees. They hide
right,
in trees and they watch from up high, and they go on top of houses and they watch somebody coming in and out. Like I make sure every time I leave my house, I look up at the roof before I
right,
step out. That's just an internal thing now for me to automatically do that.
right. That's great. And people that are in this field and researchers, they have to train themselves in the woods always to look up.
Yes.
But yeah, a lot of heads and even other body parts, without getting too graphic, have also been found displayed in tops of trees.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that is, you have one of the most famous cases in the Dogman community, which is the LBL, the Land Between the Lakes,
Yeah.
and that's in Tennessee.
Oh, yes, I've heard about that.
Yeah, and that one you had a young family that
Mm-hmm.
were in an RV camper, and they
Yeah.
pulled into this campsite at dusk. It wasn't quite dark yet; it was at dusk,
Mm-hmm.
and they pull into this campsite. Well, the mom and the daughter were inside the camper, probably preparing dinner, with the husband and his son were outside trying to level the camper, which is the first thing you do once you pull into a campsite and
Exactly.
you unhook from the campers, trying to level out the camper.
Mhm.
So the mom, the way the story goes is they speculate the mom had heard some noise, and she looks outside and sees the husband and son being attacked by some large creature.
Oh my goodness.
She tries to lock the door of the camper, and she tries to hide the daughter, it was speculated.
Mhm.
um, the creature got in the camper and killed the mother.
Oh,
And what happened is another camper arrived at the campsite at dark,
oh,
and as they were setting up, they noticed the campsite near them. They noticed the carnage from this what had
wow.
taken place with this incident.
Yeah.
So they called the police in horror,
Hmm.
and they got the police out there. They got the state police out there, the local police. They got federal agents out there. They got wildlife and fisheries department out there. Everybody was on deck. They called everyone to the scene,
Wow.
and then some of the police were doing a search party for the daughter, 4 year old daughter, because they couldn't find her anywhere.
Yeah.
And one police officer said that he was walking in the woods and he noticed there was drips on his face, and it
Oh,
turned out it was blood, and it was the daughter had been dismembered and set at the top of a tree in different parts.
oh my goodness. Poor thing. Wow.
Right. I listened to uh, the testimony of two people that claimed to be state troopers that were at the scene that night,
Hmm.
one federal agent that claims to have been at the scene that night, and
Wow.
one wildlife and fisheries person that claimed that they had a connection to that night. that all confirm that story.
Wow.
Not to mention locals, because it started getting out amongst these officers and their immediate family and stuff in the town,
Mhm.
what had taken place. And that was the land between the lakes in Tennessee. And yesterday I told you the story about um, there was a wildlife and fisheries agent that also worked in that same exact area.
Mhm.
Um, and he happened to be on his day off and was fishing or something. He was in a boat just about 30 to 40 feet offshore, and
Mhm.
he saw this large creature, which at first he thought was a horse because it was on all fours, but it was
Yeah.
so big, it was so huge, he thought it was a horse. And he saw it kind of, and then he started to realize, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And he started to realize this thing is not normal.
Mhm.
And he started trying to signal this young couple that were in this camping at this campsite, and they were in a little pop-up tent.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he's yelling and screaming. Well, he got their attention. They came out of the tent, but
Oh,
he said they were just far enough apart from each other, with him being offshore in the boat,
yeah.
that they could hear him yelling. They could see he was trying to get their attention, but they couldn't understand what it was he was trying to say.
Oh, wow.
And he says, as he's trying to warn them desperately, this thing attacks the two of them and kills them right in front of him. And he said this happened in broad daylight. This was not at night.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
broad daylight in the middle of the day. And he said he saw the thing attack them and kill both of them. And he said he was so shocked that
Wow.
he peed all over himself, and then
Mhm.
he blacked out. He said he
Mm.
completely blacked out. He woke up downstream, miles downstream in the boat, on the edge of the water,
Wow.
and came back to his senses.
Oh my goodness.
But he had decided that he didn't want to report this. As horrific as it was,
Yeah.
he was only 2 years on the job. He was still very new,
Yeah.
and he assumed that the higher ups would have known if something like this had existed. And he was afraid, he said, for his job and for his
Exactly.
family
Yeah.
and for his pension,
Yeah. Exactly.
So he didn't talk about it, and he carried the story in silence for 20 years. But he got cancer,
Mhm.
and he was getting close to dying. So he decided, I can't go, I can't pass on from this world
Yeah.
and face any sort of judgment or God or Great Spirit or anything like that
Yeah.
without getting this off my chest, because I feel guilty about this.
Mm.
And he talked about having the weight of the world on his shoulders, keeping this burden,
Wow.
and he feels bad that he didn't report it, although he didn't think it would do much good at the time.
Yeah.
But he finally made a deathbed confession and put his story out there, and he died 2 weeks after doing that
Yeah.
of
Wow.
cancer.
That must
So,
have been so, the biggest burden. I can
right,
imagine. I cannot imagine going through, witnessing something like that, let alone what I already carried on my shoulders, because it is a burden. That's an excellent way to describe what you see, because first of all, nobody's gonna believe you. Second of all, people are gonna think you're crazy, but then you're already thinking you are crazy because of this thing. Like it makes you think differently.
right. Yeah, and the mind plays tricks on you. It's going to make you second guess everything you saw.
Exactly.
And especially when it comes to things that aren't supposed to exist
Hmm.
in the general public,
Yeah.
what we are and are not allowed to believe, then yeah, your mind's going to play tricks on you all the more. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can totally understand that.
Yeah. The biggest thing I learned from it is that there is no such thing as normal. And
Right.
I wish I was taught that from an early age. The education that I was taught in school growing up didn't matter, and it doesn't matter because half of it is BS anyway.
Yeah, it's a good point. The older I get and the more I learn, the more I realize that everything I was taught or told growing up is not true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not.
So it
That's a sad thing, and we have to learn. we're learning the hard way. A lot of us are learning the hard way. And what I learned is that, like I said, there's no normal. There's no such thing as normal.
Right. Yeah, and that bar is moved all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People didn't believe in UFOs and these people that claim to be abductees for many many years, completely ridiculed, and now more and more things are coming out about that. In fact, the government's actually admitted on several occasions that aliens exist
Yeah.
and that they've had encounters, even
Mm-hmm.
though they're slowly, I think, trying to condition the public on that fact.
Yeah.
I learned in my time in the military, indirectly. I can't say talk too much about it, but I learned working there that aliens exist, and no one will ever change my mind on that. I've actually seen a UFO one time with a friend of mine who was with me. We both saw the exact same thing,
Yeah.
and we were on top of a mountain on a volcano, and we decided we were going to spend the night on a volcano top, and
Uh-huh.
we had to hide from like the park rangers,
Yeah.
because it was illegal for you to stay out there at night. But we
Wow.
snuck, we hid and we snuck out there. We were so high up, we had an observatory, like a
Wow.
space observatory that was actually below us at a distance.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a beautiful night. And then we saw, and I was just telling my friends some of the training I had in the military about navigation with stars
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that with the North Star. And I was just telling him about that when we had our incidents and saw what we saw.
Wow.
And I told my friends that's either that's alien technology because it broke all of our known laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
So it completely operated in a way I've been taught is impossible, just like we said a minute ago, right? But the second part I said to that is if it's not aliens, then B, it's our own technology. I said, but B supposes A. I said, there's no way we would be that far advanced with technology if it wasn't for ET help, so to speak.
Yes, exactly.
So, but we both know what we saw. I even have a friend of mine. It's really funny. He's an Italian, old school Italian guy in New York,
Mm-hmm.
and he always argues with me, telling me that aliens are not real. But he and his whole neighborhood said they saw a UFO fly over their neighborhood one time,
Wow.
and they said it was like just above the houses.
Wow. And
And
he
and
still doesn't believe?
and he still doesn't, but he still wants to argue with me. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
He said the whole neighborhood, all the kids and all, they were all outside and they saw this. He said it was a gigantic triangle. He said it was golden color. It looked golden color to them, but it
Mhm.
was a giant triangle. And he said it was moving very slowly over the tops of their houses. And he said that it made no sound. It made no sound at all. But everyone there saw it. And yet, yeah, he still wants to argue with me about
That
these
is
things like this.
crazy. I don't think I would want to argue with someone who doesn't believe anything they saw.
Right, right. Well, I've heard,
That
that's a point I like to talk about a lot.
yeah.
And that is, we live in a generation today that is if I don't see it, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because I've got a philosophy background, um, philosophy is about studying the perfection of things that we come to know through reasoning, but we don't have physical, tangible proof of them. You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yes.
But yet we're still studying the perfections, still trying to arrive at truth, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And people think today that, oh, science, empirical science, our standard today, rules everything. And that's not true.
That is
They,
not true.
that is not true. First of all, it is so easy to manipulate that in the outcome that you have to be very careful and suspect of that to begin with.
Yeah.
Now, it does have its place for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, it was empirical science is an offshoot that came out of philosophy, not backwards, not in the reverse. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't say that, oh, empirical science is greater than philosophy. No,
No.
philosophy is greater than empirical science because it comes under it, it comes after it, it comes
Exactly.
as an offshoot, as a part of it, you know. And we need to get away from this notion that we have to have physical proof for everything that we can believe. And
Yeah.
I ask friends of mine all the time. Most of them are God fearing people, and I
Mhm.
ask them, well, how how is it you don't believe in aliens? And they, because they've never seen one.
Yeah.
And I say, well, do you believe in God? Do you believe in angels? Do you believe in higher powers? And they're like, oh, absolutely, yes. I'm like, how? Prove it.
Yeah.
Show it to me. You know what I'm saying?
I
So
agree. I agree 100%. And um, just mainly because of my own experiences, I believe in all this types of stuff, and I never used to
right,
because I was so sheltered when I was small. I was only taught in certain things, and I don't know to this day if my parents even ever experienced anything. If they did, they never told it. They never told us. They never showed it, and I
right,
had to learn on my own. All these otherworldly things are out there.
right. And we
Yeah.
can't ever come to knowledge or truth about these things if we don't have an open mind going into it.
Hmm. If you don't have an open mind, I think the people who are closed-minded and then they do end up experiencing something are the most traumatized.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because
Um,
their beliefs were different before then. So,
in metallurgy, in blacksmithing, I flew to Sweden to study how to be a blacksmith one time
oh wow.
at a famous company called Grand Force Burks that makes some of the best axes in the world. To this day, they're my favorite axes for doing bushcraft and wilderness type activities. But
Okay.
one of the things we quickly learn there is, you want to make a knife hard, but once you finish hardening your knife, then you have to go through a tempering process, and
Hmm.
that tempering process softens specific parts of the knife, like the edge.
I see.
Um, or actually, I got that backwards. You want the blade to be hard, but you want the spine to be softened, and so
Oh,
you temper the spine, and that way it has a little more flexibility, has a little more give. Otherwise, the knife, though very sharp, is
mhm.
going to be extremely brittle and break easy. And I think that's a similar analogy to what you just said
Yeah,
for
yeah,
people that are, because we can relate everything to nature, and that's part of
yeah, yeah.
philosophy too, is that
Hmm.
we learn universal laws of nature by observing nature. So the same way with knife making, if
Hmm.
you make a knife too hard, it's going to be brittle and it's just going to break. So there's got to be a balance for it being hard and having some flexibility.
For sure, for sure. And
And
that, oh,
go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say that that kind of resonates with the indigenous ways of thinking too, because
Okay.
we think that um, in order for there to be bad, there has to be equal good.
Right.
So we have to learn to live with these things. We can't fight them off.
Right.
No matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, there's always going to be something equal that's bad or something equal that's good. So there's always going to be a balance, just like you said with nature. Nature is not going to allow anything to be um, up and down. It's gonna even everything out all
It
the
has a
time.
way to balance itself, right?
Yes. So
Which right there shows a higher power at work.
exactly, and that also comes in with the giants and the indigenous people and all that kind of thing.
Right. No, that's a great point. A lot of times I think it's easier to see the bad, and sometimes it can be harder to see the good.
Yeah.
But if you've got one, it presupposes the other. So,
Hmm.
like you just said, if you're going to have the evil, then it only proves that there's good. I'll give you an example of that. Um, Friends of mine that have gotten into this field, right?
Yeah.
Or let's broaden it to say like the paranormal, right?
Mhm.
They found out quickly that once they started talking to people about this kind of stuff and get stories out there, especially about ghosts and hauntings and demons and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
they started having activity at their homes.
Yeah.
They started having entities manifest in their bedrooms, touching them while
Yeah.
they're sleeping.
Mhm.
Affecting them and their children. Right. So they quickly realized, okay, I've opened myself up to this.
Mhm.
I might have invited it in unknowingly, and now I've got to take steps to get rid of this. And
Yeah.
so many of those people have become much more spiritual
Yeah.
because they realize they need that counterbalance.
Yeah.
And now to this day, they're much more spiritual people. They say prayers and they call on higher and good sources
Yeah.
to rid themselves and protect themselves of these things, and it works.
It
It
works.
works,
It
right?
works. Really
And
does.
so yeah, there's an example where the evil, which is easy in manifesting itself,
Mhm.
led people to a higher power and a better side
Yeah.
that that was able to balance that out.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important part of one of my favorite movies I talk about often is Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Mhm.
And in Exorcism of Emily Rose, um, that was loosely based on a true story
Mhm.
of a girl who claimed that she was possessed by demonic forces or the devil, right?
Okay.
And it was a really good movie. It's a movie really, and I was able to meet the two directors and writers that wrote the movie.
Oh.
One of them worked with a company that I work with,
Okay.
and as far as the film industry, and it's funny because one of them was a writer. I mean, one of them was a Christian, and the other was a non-believer, just kind of an atheist. And but both of them worked together to create the story. But my favorite line from the story, and it's a true line from their investigation,
Yeah.
was the little girl who was having the demonic activity. She said, "How can people not believe in a God when I show them the devil?"
Wow.
And
That.
that line hit me hard. You know,
Wow.
how can we not believe in a God when I show them the devil, when I
Oh.
show them the evil? You know,
Yeah.
so that had a big influence on me. And some of my friends say, John, why are you wanting to go into this field? Why are you
Yeah.
wanting to talk about this kind of stuff? I mean, this is crazy stuff, and it's dark stuff, it's bad stuff.
Mhm.
Stay away from that stuff. And I
Mhm.
say, no. How can you not believe in higher things and in beautiful things and in holy things when you see the darkness?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why I do it, and trying to arrive at the truth.
Mhm.
Um, Kay, one more thing I wanted to ask you about was we had talked about before in the pre-interview
Mhm.
about legends from the First Nations people that were other types of cryptids beyond Sasquatch and Dogmen.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that in your the traditions of your Native American communities that you talk about the existence of giants in your past. Can you go into that?
Yeah. The only thing that I remember being heard of the giants, of hearing about the giants, is when the elders used to sit and talk about them a long time ago.
Okay,
I was just a little girl,
right.
and I remember my grandmother. She would speak about it with her friends, and I wasn't like, we were not allowed to be around the adults when they spoke. They would tell us in our language, like, go over there, you don't need to be listening to us, and all that kind of stuff. But being me, I was I was the baby of my grandmother. She would call me baby, and I wouldn't be far from her. So I'd hear some of the things they spoke about, and I remember them talking about giants one time. And so I asked her, she used to put me to bed every night and she'd sing to me. And then I asked her one time, I said, what were you talking about with so and so? She said, what do you mean? And I said, what are giants? And so she told me, I didn't think she told me a lot, but she told me enough to believe that, that we did coexist with them. And like we were talking about, there were bad ones and good ones, and but they weren't around anymore. I remember her telling me that they're not here no more. And I asked her, where did they go? And she said, they were killed. And I said, by who? And she said, other giants. She said they fought each other because the bad ones were being mean to the humans. And this was not in English. She was speaking in our language to me.
Hmm.
And I said, okay. And, she told me that I said, well, where are they? And she said, they're buried. And what she told me was that they would take apart their body, kind of like dismembering.
Hmm.
I didn't know. She put it in a way that where it didn't say dismembering, but she said they would bury them separately, their body parts separately, so they couldn't come back together. And
Okay, like a superstition or just
yeah,
to hide them
I
better.
think like a superstition, but there's a creature in our culture. He goes by the name of Wesake Chuck, where he is a cannibal. And
Okay.
basically that's what they did with him. He was just one creature. He was the only one that people knew of. His name was Wesaga Chuck, and he would go around different tribes, stealing people, eating them, and terrorizing communities. So the tribes came together, made a plan to capture him, and what they did with him was they dismembered him and they took one each a, a body piece to their tribe. They buried it where only a couple of men warriors knew where that part was buried. So he couldn't come back. And
Okay.
and what my grandma had said was that they did those with the giants also, but not with all of them. With some of them, they just buried them, and they were in buried in the hills,
Right.
in the mountains, just places where they wouldn't be easily found.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about, when I grew up, we were always taught about Native American hills being burial sites, right, for Native
Mhm.
Americans,
Yeah.
and that you should never disturb them. However, in my studies, the older I got, Indians didn't bury their people in hills.
Hmm.
Yet we were raised being taught that anytime you see a hill, it's a possible Indian burial mound, and we should avoid it.
Hmm.
And many of the giant skeletons that have found and discovered have been in these hills that that were oftentimes created by Indians, but
Hmm.
not for their own people, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And some other interesting things, as children in the U.S., we're always taught that Indians Native Americans in the U.S. would hold up their hand and say "how," right? And
Yeah.
right. Well, one of the things that I came across in studying this material is that one of the reasons they claim that that was a tradition is because the Indians were trying to see from a distance how many fingers you had when you held your hand up. Because oftentimes these giants would have six fingers and six toes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what my grandma had mentioned too, that they did have six fingers, six toes.
So they said that's where that tradition came from. Um, yeah, so I was going to ask you that. What other physical descriptions did she might have given you?
She said that I asked her how tall were these giants, because that's the first time I had heard of giant, the word giant.
Right.
But she said they're big people. They're
Hmm.
called big people in our culture. That's how they're translated as. But in European language, they call them giants.
Right.
So she said they were about maybe 8 feet and up.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly how far back, that the giants were around, but there was good and bad giants, she had said. And the
Right.
bad giants were hurting the humans. So um, the tribes, the leaders had to make a plan. They had to come together to decide how they were going to stop this from happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Did she give any other physical descriptions like the six fingers or six toes?
6 fingers, 6 toes. She said they were human. They looked human. And she said they were really tall. When I got older and I was old enough to understand more like how to describe feet and stuff like that, she said they were about 8 feet, 8 feet. And
Okay.
but All she said was they were human-like. And she also told me, because I didn't really believe in the giants. Like, she knew I didn't believe in that story wholeheartedly, but she told me, granddaughter, she said, do you believe in the little people? Which I do, since I was small, because I've seen them. I've witnessed the little people.
So what's the little people?
Little people is they're little people. They're small. They're sm they're I don't
what
think
what size is small?
they're small, like a foot and under.
A foot and under.
A
Okay.
foot and under, and I've witnessed those also.
Now, is
And
that a part of your
it's native
native
people.
lore?
A lot of native people, though we don't mention these people, and I'm surprised that you haven't heard of them. So I don't know if I should even be talking
Oh,
about them
no,
now.
I've heard of little people. Just for the sake of the audience who might not have heard of little people.
Okay. So the little people are um the way I saw them, that they are physical beings. I've seen them in
Right.
physical, and I've seen two types. There's one type that is mean, and it looked vicious. It was looking vicious to me when I
Right.
saw it. And then there was a good one who gave me a peaceful feeling that I was protected by that one.
Right.
These things are small, they're fast, and you can barely see them. The only way that you'll see them is if they want you to see them. And what our people believe is that if they allow you to see them, then you're blessed,
Hmm.
that you're
There's
protected.
actually there's actually a lot of videos on YouTube of places like in South America
Hmm.
and in like really poor places
Yeah.
where kids oftentimes in their bedrooms or playing out in the street come
Hmm.
across these little people.
Yep. They like kids, and they show themselves to the children because they're pure. And that's
Right.
when I had seen my first encounter with a little person, was when I was small. And at the time, I had little toys, those jacks. I think they're
Hmm.
called jacks,
Right.
where you pick one up, bounce a ball, pick one up.
Right.
I was missing those. I got them for Christmas, and I didn't even get to play with them yet.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, one night, I seen something come into my room. The door was open just a little bit, come into my room, took a jack and ran out. And how I knew it was my jack was it was shiny.
Mm.
It shone in the light, the hallway light, because we had slept with the hallway light on. And I was like,
Right.
what? I didn't. So yeah, I
They
told
like
him,
shiny things.
yeah, they like shiny things, and it was taking my little
Did
jack.
did your did your native people ever talk about the little
Yeah,
people?
yeah, we talk about them a lot. We talk about them openly amongst each other because they make themselves known to us also. Like, they're normal for us.
Right.
So my late grandmother had told me, you believe in the little people, right? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, why don't you believe in the big people?
Mm.
So I said, okay. Just
I had
because I didn't see one, I said it doesn't make it not real. So
I had a friend recently that said he was called out to investigate an area where it was in the forest in the
mhm.
northwest, and these I don't know if it was probably loggers, I would guess, were seeing strange things coming out of trees when they were cutting them down and
Oh,
running in the forest, and they thought that they were like just little animals. But
yeah,
my friend said that he came to the conclusion that they, for different reasons, that they were actual little people.
yep. They live in trees. They live in the forest. Um,
Right.
my auntie had actually stumbled upon a little village of them. Uh,
Really.
yeah, but the village was abandoned. She thinks that the village was actually lived in at the time she stumbled upon it, but they just hid when they knew she was near. Because
Right.
she said there were little houses and everything. And she actually took a picture of what she had found. And then when she had gotten the picture printed off, it didn't come out good.
It didn't come out
So
good. That's interesting.
my grandmother told her, "You're not meant to take pictures. You're not supposed to take pictures of these types of things."
Right.
She said, "What made you think that that picture would turn out for you to show everybody?"
Right. Well,
Yes.
I can tell you in Native American lore, in the Southwest, there's a place called Lovelock Cave, and there's stories by the tribal people there, the Indians, that they fought giants in North America back in the day,
Yeah.
and they describe them as being very large, like almost 20 feet tall,
Wow.
um,
Cool.
and having long red hair,
Mhm.
having 6 fingers and 6 toes, and having double rows of teeth. Right
Oh my
now,
goodness.
what's really interesting about that is I study a lot of ancient Christian history in ancient times,
Mhm.
and you came across the description of what's called a Nephilim, right?
Okay.
Um, and a Nephilim was a giant, and it was most often described as having red hair, 6 fingers and 6 toes, and double rows of teeth.
Mhm.
So there's a direct correlation between these ancient stories from the Christian church and these almost more modern stories,
Yeah.
even though they're still from very long times ago,
Yeah.
but not compared to the history of like the Bible or something. But
Yeah.
where these Indians have these stories that they pass on to this day,
Mhm.
with their elders passing down the community of these giants. And they said the giants were terrorizing the tribes and kidnapping their people and eating them.
Mm.
And so all the Indian villages united together to declare war against these particular giants. And they trapped them in Lovelock Cave. And what they did was they set fire in front of the cave
Mhm.
and smoked them out inside. And what's neat is I saw a video one time of a researcher who went to check out the Lovelock Cave, and
Mhm.
sure enough, he found a handprint on the ceiling of the cave that was made from soot, like from a fire, right? So there was this black handprint on the top of the cave, and when he took a ruler and measured the handprint,
Mhm.
the hand was 19 inches long
Oh
from the
my
handprint.
goodness. That's a
Can you,
big hand.
that's a big hand.
I'm sitting here looking at my hand now.
Yeah, imagine your hand being 19 inches long. Right.
It's crazy. So where is this located?
It's in the Southwest,
Okay.
Lovelock Cave. It might even be Texas. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but it's called Lovelock Cave
Okay.
in the Southwest. But here's another interesting thing. Um, as I often touch upon, like last time, if you look at microfiche
Uh-huh.
of recorded newspapers in the United States going back to the 1800s, you
Mhm.
will find literally hundreds and hundreds of stories of people discovering bones of giants.
Mhm.
But all of that is almost lost to modern day people and beliefs, even though it's just from the 1800s to today.
Yeah.
And many times when people find stuff like that, they try to contact the authorities or the authorities step in. The
Yeah.
Smithsonian Institute gets involved, and then these things disappear.
Mhm. That
Um,
that kind of makes me wonder, well, what something my grandmother had.
are you there? Okay, I lost you. I'll give you a second. I'm not sure what happened here or why we got cut off. But
Hello, hello,
hey,
can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. You back
Okay.
on?
Yeah, that was weird. Okay, so
Yeah, things like that happen in this line of
yeah,
business. But go ahead. You were saying?
yeah. So my grandmother had mentioned, I asked her, where are these giants? Why don't they show it to us in museums if they're finding bones and stuff? And she
Right.
said the Muniawak, the European settlers won't allow it. It doesn't fit in with their Bible theory.
Right. Well, and see, that's what's interesting. It totally fits in with the Christian Bible because the Christian Bible talks about these things in our past. All
Yeah.
right. I've studied this in great detail for many years.
Yeah.
So the Christian Bible does that. The problem is the modern science, which is
Mhm.
Darwinian, which
Yeah.
that says that God does not exist,
Hmm.
and that's what controls most of the scientists in the world today.
Hmm.
They're the ones that say we refuse to accept giants as being real because it supports what the Christian Bible says.
Yeah. What I should have said about it, she meant it doesn't fit in with the evolution
Right.
theory.
The evolution theory. That's exactly right. That's
So,
exactly right.
because me growing up, I wasn't really taught the Bible way.
Right. Sure.
I didn't know anything about it, but she said something about the way the white men are speaking about how the world came about. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't fit in with that.
Right.
So
Right.
therefore, the giants are didn't exist.
Right. Yeah, so that's part of the reason they try to cover it up.
Yeah.
But that's the thing when it comes to aliens, when it comes to dogmen, when it comes to Sasquatch, when it comes to any of this stuff, the powers that be don't want you to know that it exists and will ridicule you, make fun of you
Mhm.
for but I try to tell people how stupid that is because just the essence we are losing our identity as a nation and as a people.
Yeah.
The whole idea of Americanism is the First Amendment and being able to have a voice and disagree with everybody else and not be
Exactly.
ridiculed as crazy or silenced, censored because of that. And look in our world today now, how many people are getting censored off of online shows and everything else because of their beliefs or what they say. And we're not supposed to be a people that does that nor believes in that. We should
Hmm.
be fighting against that. There
Exactly.
shouldn't be censorship of thought and ideas. We can't have one group that's controlling everyone's mind
Yeah.
and saying this you can believe and this you can't.
Yeah. There's only so long that people can do that to other people, though. There's only
Right.
so long that, and there's only so much you can do to suppress people. Eventually, people are going to wake up.
And history has proven this over and over, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
So
like
yeah,
I said,
everything's gonna come out.
everything will come out and it might not be good, but I mean, it
Right.
might not be good, but there's also, everything will balance itself out.
Everything balances itself out. That's absolutely right. Well, Kay, we're gonna wrap it up for this show. But I tell you, I've appreciated it. I appreciate your time and your stories, and I'm really glad that you were able to come back and join us.
I'm really glad I was able to come back too. And I was looking forward to it since yesterday. I felt bad for what happened. I don't know what happened, but
Right.
thanks for contacting me again.
Oh,
And
no problem.
I
No problem.
appreciate your time and I appreciate you allowing me to tell my stories finally. I feel better about it now already.
And thank goodness for that.
Exactly.
That's what this is all about: getting the truth out there, but also helping people to in a way where they're not going to be ridiculed, where they feel safe to share the truth of the experiences that happened to them.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thanks for listening to your audience.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Have a good day. Thank you so much,
You too. Be safe.
everybody's DogmanCams.com podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Be safe, guys.
Be safe.